Welcome to another episode of William Steele True Crime and Steele Spotlight Radio, TV, and now public relations. We are back with another show with my incredible co-host, retired ATF agent, Ignacio Esteban. Ignacio, welcome back.
Oh, Bill, always love to be on your show, man. Being a co-host here is phenomenal. Enjoy them all.
Appreciate it. I know you're definitely in demand as a guest all over the world. I know you've been on Australian shows. You've been on Sean Atwood. Shout out to Sean Atwood. We love you. You're just you're all over the place. You're like me. You can't get enough of this stuff.
No, I'm like a professional guest and now a professional co-host with you.
That's exactly right, man. I appreciate it. So we're gonna roll right into the show today, which I'm gonna let Ignacio introduce the topic and the subtopics because this is a really serious issue here.
Serious. I've written 6 books on it. I work cases on it. I know a lot of the agents who work major cases on the one percenters, on the most violent biker groups in the United States and internationally. This is a crime syndicate that started in the U.S. and went international. While you have the Italians and the drug groups that started internationally, that came to America. Now, this is homegrown. This is homegrown crime syndicate. And I'll talk about the Hells Angels. So what's a one percenter? Also the worst, right, of the biker world. 99% of biker owners are law-abiding, but that 1% that was deemed by the AMA that said, hey, that these guys are pretty much badasses, not law-abiding, and they like being that way, right, Bill? And you got the Hells Angels, you got the outlaws, right? You got the pagans, the banditos, the vagos, the Mongols. Those are the big 6, I call them. And then you have all these other groups that are involved and trying to also climb up. And a lot of them end up being support chapters for these big ones. And then they come in over there and vice versa. So we can talk about, I did a book on the Hells Angels, Sonny about Full Throttle, Riding with the Hells Angels, the life of Sonny Barger. He was probably the most iconic face of the Hells Angels of the biker world for the counterculture movement. Back in the 60s and 70s, right? When you think of the counterculture, you think of Sonny Barger and these guys, and they're very anti what the establishment was about. They're not clean cut. They were involved of their biker underworld, right? What's going on? And I'll talk a little bit about Sonny Barger, but he just passed away last summer, right? And he was there for almost 50, 60 years being the face of there. And he went from everything. He went from started the biker movement. He was the consultant for Sons of Anarchy, right? An extremely popular show that did very well on FX and other networks. And then he was an author, and he starred in the show himself. So you go from being an ultra criminal to doing that. And he also was a domestic abuser also. He had issues with his third wife and his stepdaughter, severely domestic abuser. So Sonny Barger wore many faces and what kind of stuff he did. He came out of an abusive household. His mom left him when he was 4 months old. He was born in the 30s in Modesto, California. His father was alcoholic. He had an older sister. He dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, right? He joined the Army underaged. He lied about his age to join it. And once they found out he was underage, I think after 18 months, they had him out of, but he wasn't dishonorable discharge. He was just discharged from the military.
Right.
And then he ended up starting his chapter out there in Oakland for the Hells Angels. But the original one, and this was in the 50s, the original started by Otto Friendly out of San Bernardino, right? But he started the Hells Angel out of Oakland back in the 50s. So I think it was, my dates on my book, I want to say it was late 50s, like 57 around there in that time period, right? And he was able to consolidate with the bylaws, everything I was reading, the Hells Angel under one umbrella. Because you had multiple Hells Angels around there, and he was able to move it up. And this guy Freely would later be arrested, and he moved the mother chapter, so to speak, the headquarters from San Bernardino to his backyard in Oakland. And of course, the rest was history from there. Once he moved to Oakland, he was the face of the Hells Angels.
Yourself as a retired ATF agent, especially active in South Florida.
Yeah.
Are they active down there? Were they active there? Are there other motorcycle?
In Florida,
South Florida.
Yeah, in my time when I was there, and I retired a couple of years ago, but I was out there. It was an outlaw state. The outlaws ran Florida, right? Hells Angels were prominent in California and the West, and they had different chapters around there. But Florida was there. But now things are kind of changing a little bit with the Mongols coming over, right? I see more Mongols. My time, I didn't see a lot of Mongols in Florida with the pagans, and allegedly, while I was reading, there might be an alliance between them trying to get the outlaws. And because Florida used to be an open state, and under Taco Bowman back in the 70s and 80s,
Right.
became under their umbrella, right? And then things changed. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. That's interesting there. But Sonny Barger, going back to him for a little bit, he died last year. He had cancer issues and all that, but he was involved. There was a lot of different biker wars. If you want to see some of the nasty biker wars, I wrote a good book on biker wars too. Some of the most famous ones. You look at Laughlin, Nevada, Harris, right? I don't know if you ever seen that.
I remember that, the footage in the casino.
Oh my gosh, you haven't seen that? We can maybe put that picture up there, and you see the brawl, the Mongols, the Hells Angels just going at it. And that's another thing I was not happy with. Police stayed outside on that one. And you had patrons hiding, cowering, and it's almost, they have knives, they have guns. They had to come in there. I know it was it was in Laughlin, small police department, right? Especially the one that deal with the casino gambling. But you got to, again, address what's going on there and at least do something, get the patrons out of there. But if you look at the videos, they're out. The people are fighting us in there. The people being stabbed. It's really atrocious. And later they would blame, I think they would allegedly Hell's Angels say, hey, there was one of the police officers said that there were some Mongols around Hell's Angel, or vice versa. And you know what? I think that this was brewing from what happened because they had both of them wore the lower rocker. Well, you know what that is? That means this is my state.
Is
the
that
Mongols
California
is their state.
California at the on the bottom of it or something?
Right. They say California is their state. They say California is their state. Right. So they're feuding over, the state. I mean, it's just typical 1%er biker things. It's always about rivalry, about territory, making more money through drug trafficking, firearms trafficking, extortion, whatever else they get involved in. It's always the same thing. One battle over another battle. Recently, you haven't seen this video, the Vagos and Hells Angels, chapter president from Las Vegas, and others were arrested for shooting, trying to get payback. And this was in Nevada, near Wheelwagon, Nevada. I think the highway I have on my book, and they're going up there, and you can see the video, and they're shooting at the Vagos for payback what happened a month earlier, killing one of their guys. Right. So, and now they're in trial. They're going to be tried for murder, but 5 or 6 of them, including the chapter president of Las Vegas, for trying murder. And the Vago guys testified in a grand jury against them. They pretty much called them cowards. Interesting stuff. I read an indictment.
Try to get the link for that video and the other one as well. Put them in the description, if not on the show. Which telling stories for informational and crime for prevention reasons.
Yes.
Open the eyes of the public and really to send a message to these guys. Look, I was a criminal. What's the outcome of being involved in these lifestyles? Nothing. Misery, loneliness in prison, loss of your family, loss of your freedom, loss of the food you want to eat, loss of the ability to raise your own kids. So I encourage people to get out of their lifestyle one way or the other. I don't know. I think some organizations you can't leave without consequences. But what would your message be? Just curious.
In any of these guys,
law enforcement aside for a second, to these guys that might still be in the life, a biker, 1% biker, what would you say to these guys?
It's not worth it. It's going to end up. Look at your other guys that continue to be arrested. You're going to get killed by a rival, killed from within, or you're going to get long incarceration, just like with the mafia. Or the drug cartels. They like the flash to money. The key is find a profession, get your education, find a trade, do something that's legit so you can sleep good at night. Because once you go down that path and you start killing, you start selling drugs, you start doing all these bad things, it's going to end up going one way. And you're not going to like the consequences. And if you don't care, well, if you like the lifestyle, well, you know how it's going to end for you. And that's what happens.
Am I accurate in saying for those major 1%er groups that there are really horrible consequences if they try to quit it once they're in?
Oh, there's huge consequences. Racketeering cases are enormous. I mean, you're seeing that's why they're getting devastated. I pretty much put my conclusion in my book is just like with the mafia, they're pretty much a thing of the past. The same thing has happened with these guys. They're getting decimated by the racketeering cases, and they're feeling it, they're seeing it. I mean, look another big one. Taco Bowman, back in the 90s, I knew one of the prosecutors on the case out of Tampa. He ended up getting 2 life sentences for racketeering, right? And he was another guy. He grew up in Catholic schools, right? And I don't know what triggered, what happened, where he ends up going that way, and he ends up going into the outlaws, and eventually he becomes the national president, I think, in the early 80s, right? and then he becomes brutal. He gives orders. I mean, you transform into a different person, and that's what happens to these guys. They get transformed. Sonny Barger the same way. The only time he was like the Teflon Don of the biker world. I mean, Taco Bowman did some serious time. Doc Cavazos from the Mongols, he was a rise and fall. He cooperated because he only got 14 years in his racketeering case, right? But now the feds are going after the patch, right? They're trying to take the right for them to be able to wear that. They can seize it. So that's interesting where that's going. They failed the first attempt because the judge felt like the federal government was picking and choosing what symbols they can seize and not. But now they changed the language and they're trying again. They're trying to take another bite of the apple to see if they can take them down. So that'd be interesting.
What is that legal argument, if you know it? Is it saying that a patch or you're putting your name of a known club, and I'm not going to say the names out here. You could say them what you want.
It's with the Mongols
club
right now.
Is you're part of a criminal organization, therefore you're not allowed to display that. Is that the argument?
Yeah, and Doc Caval said that was like their what empowers them, their shield that made some give them that reputation that puts fear into the public, right? You see Hell's Angels. Some people say, "Oh my God, this is pretty much." Some people think like domestic terrorist group. Some ways they're violent, they're angry. I mean, they go after. And look what happened just last year between the Hell's Angels and the Mongols. They're in a shootout, endangering the public. People are cowering, and you see the video pulling all this sun, and their shots being fired. Or you're in Laughlin, Nevada, at the casino. You think you're only part of that? You're there just having some fun, and all of a sudden this huge melee breaks out. Or you're at the Commodore in Plainsville, New York, where the pagans 70-something storm a conference, a Hellraiser with Hell's Angels. That Sonny Barger was there, and they're trying to kill Sonny Barger and other Hell's Angels, and you're there too. So it never ends. The battles, Twin Peaks, with the Banditos and the Cossacks going out there shooting in public out there. It's always one after another. And I talk about, and not just in the United States, around the world. A few years ago, there were some Vagos that were in Juarez, and they were gunned down. Was it drug related? I don't know.
I remember seeing a documentary on the History Channel, and it was put out by the History. I forget the name of it, but it was something to do with the Hells Angels, and it was Chris Christie. He was interviewed, and I guess he was at one time one of the leaders or leadership.
Yeah.
And they moved him out, and a lot of his gripes were like he claims, and I'm not claiming this, I'm just repeating what's out there, so don't come after me. He was claiming publicly that Sonny Barger had called 911 on his wife, but really on himself, and that there was a gun in the vehicle and that she was laying injured in the house. And they said, well, I think they asked him if there was any guns. And at the meeting about this, when they had the meeting to try to expel Barger, he actually had referred to the 911 tapes and said, that's a violation. You're out mandatory if you call police for any reason. And, and that's something about a movie they made that I think Barger kept the money for. He didn't really share it with club members, so there was a lot of bitterness with that. Did you see that series?
I haven't, but I'll take a look at it. It's interesting. But
it's phenomenal.
What I've read also that was Sonny Barger, a lot of people didn't like that he was a domestic abuser, right? Later in life, he had huge drug addiction issues early in his career. He had an addiction, and according to what I was reading reports out of Arizona, I can't remember the county right now. I think it's Maricopa County. Reading out the sheriff's office, the stepdaughter thought that at any moment he was going to kill him. They were living in constant fear.
It's ironic we're talking about this. I have a guy who's his family and his loved ones are fans of my work and my pages and stuff. His name's Freddie. I'm not going to put his last name out there. He was a 1%er in some kind of leadership out in New Jersey. And because these are his claims, because they couldn't get him for his involvement, and he really, I guess, had pulled back a lot in involvement with the club, that they framed him for a murder, and he's now doing a couple of life sentences and some drug stuff and this and that. And so he's got really, really good claims of actual innocence. I like everything I've read so far. They continue to send me stuff. Shout out to Freddie and his loved ones. And I do believe this man's sitting in prison innocent. So I'm intending to do this story. There was some controversy. People said, well, don't do it. He's this, he's that. I said, but guess what? If you're in prison innocent, and then getting old in prison, this guy used to design guitars before he went to prison. So he's a pretty well-known musician and guitar designer and all that. But it's just ironic that in my position, I have to be torn. And then people tell me, oh, don't put him on. You don't know the whole story. Well, I've seen enough of the evidence now. and the contradiction and the lies that happened in court to really frame this dude, I believe he was framed. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
I still like to cover that case.
You're breaking up a little bit, Bill, and something you're not syncing what you're saying.
Okay, I'd still like to cover that case of Freddie, the guy who was a 1%er, Jersey guy. Have you heard that?
No, I've not heard of that case. Interesting with the 1%er guys, and sometimes they do things and maybe they don't get arrested for. But this is where it changed. I'm going to go back a little bit to Sonny Barger because it's an interesting book about full throttle riding with the Hells Angels, Life of Sonny Barger. And I've done, like I said, with the outlaws, the Mongols, biker gangs. I've done 1%er. If you want just to know what a 1%er is, I wrote a book about that also.
Right.
And I've done so many shows about it. Scott Bernstein, shout out to Scott Bernstein. I did a really good show. He does a lot of stuff with the Mafia and 1%ers. I've done good shows with him, so check that out too. Matt Cox, I'm doing one. A lot of the guys have done shows also with the Hollywood Wade. Shout out to Hollywood Wade of Crime and Entertainment. I've done good shows with him too. But this here is interesting because
I'll tell you what I'm going to do if you can hear me. Am I breaking up still?
No, you're good now.
So I will put his name out there. And the reason I'm doing it is because I do believe in this particular guy's innocence. I don't agree with his lifestyle, but that's his choice. My choice was to get out of that when I got out of prison and not go backwards. But he's still in prison. I do believe he's innocent. It's Freddie Aguillo, Aguello. For the record, I believe in his innocence. Aguello. So this is his Facebook. If you guys want to follow him, fans of mine, I've talked to him once or twice from prison. He's called. He's got family members that want me to cover the case.
And he's looking at 2 life sentences for murder?
I don't have the whole case in front of me, but I think they had set him up on some drug stuff, and one of the informants admits now they lied, and things that happened were not quite as they were presented in court. And so, yeah, he was set up, and he claims this corrupt prosecutor, who's now got in trouble for other things, that there was a prosecutor looking to make headlines off of his notoriety in his case and who he was within the 1% bikers. I'm not going to mention the club that he, was affiliated with, but, for the record, I do believe in this guy's innocence, and I'm going to probably get them on.
Yeah, we'll do some more research and let's see what's going on there.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me tell you this little story here about Sonny Barger, since you brought up about how Christie wanted to get rid of him. And this is years later for being an informant, right? Cooperating with law enforcement, so to speak. Well, Sonny Barger, I guess, had a history of doing this. And I'll put this out there, and I had in my book here. For those who don't know, Sonny Barger was looking at the death penalty in California. And this pretty much changed, I think, in my opinion, because I did my analysis and research, the Hells Angels. I think Sonny Barger gets convicted of the death penalty. Later, California would change. It will become, they would abolish death penalty. Now they return to it again. But he would have had life, and he would have probably looked at life sentence, not death. By the time it was a death penalty case, and allegedly, he had shot a drug courier who owed him $80,000 while he was sleeping in a house in California, right? Come from Texas. He owed him $80,000, I guess ripped him off. And while the guy was sleeping, there was a witness that testified allegedly in trial that he shot him in the head while he was sleeping, killed him. And then they tried to burn down the property, right? So this was being tried on. A sergeant from the Oakland County Police Department testifies on his behalf and says that Barger had been cooperating with them for years. And he would provide them weapons and explosives and information about Black Panther members, ultra-leftist terrorists, which are domestic groups, and underground weather groups, right? The Sonny Barger was in the Army, and he felt patriot, but he was cooperating with law enforcement against these groups, and what they were doing in exchange of getting Hells Angel members released from prison earlier or not being charged.
Isn't that called third-party substantial assistance?
Yeah. Isn't that called cooperating with the government, right?
Oh, my God.
Pretty much being an informant. He did it for years. So was Sonny
like,
Barger an informant?
Who's the guy in Boston? Whitey Bulger. Didn't he do the same thing? He went after
the FBI, right?
He was working with
both sides,
FBI, setting up the Italian mob
right,
and other people that he didn't like, in exchange for, keep your hands off my gang and me.
That's what Sonny Barger was doing allegedly, according to the sergeant with the Oakland Police Department.
I have been a prison law clerk. I've heard it all, and I've seen it all. I've been around these gang leaders who are always with the investigators saying that somebody else is telling on them, and then the investigator tells other people he's up here telling on his own homeboys. So they're all in my book. They're all cooperating, making deals. They'll recruit people and then they'll tell on the very people they recruited to go do some violence.
Just look at the mafia. Look, perfect example. Sammy the Bull on John Gotti, right?
Right.
They take the oath that they're supposed to keep omerta, right? Say nothing, but they're all. That was the end. That's in my theory. I also do Italian mafia books. I do all the crime syndicates I've written about. You check my name, you see my books, 73 and counting. I'm thinking about doing it now because RFK Jr. I'm starting now a preliminary because I did the history of the mafia. Remember that one? It was a very successful show. You haven't seen that show there? Miami's History of the Mafia. I think it was 1,000 views already in counting. You have a picture of Castro, Meyer Lansky, and Al Capone. Check that one out. Great show, folks. You haven't seen that one? Check it out. Really good. Especially the almost murder of future President FDR with Giuseppe Zangara.
That's right.
The quickest execution of an inmate in death row history on Florida history. 10 days executed very quickly. What happened with him? And fascinating. So you listen to that. I tell that whole story. Listen to that one, folks. Check it out. But you see this guy here. Interesting ways he got him out. So a lot of people think if Sonny Barger would have been convicted, I think Hell's Angels would have gone a different path. He's acquitted. He's acquitted of that murder trial, of that murder, and things change. He does a little time later, and then there's a massive racketeering case in 1980 against him out of San Francisco, acquitted again. He becomes a Teflon Don before Gotti was a Teflon Don in the biker world. Eventually, he does about 4 years in the late 80s for going against state lines. But you know what did him? An informant from within. The chapter of arms, I'm not going to mention his name. He wrote a book about it, out of Anchorage, corrupt with the government, the feds, and they're about to go and get payback. You know, these guys are always back about killing. Oh, you took one of our guys, outlaws. We're going to get one of your guys, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, him or in a conspiracy across state lines with explosives to kill an outlaw who allegedly had killed the chapter president out of Anchorage.
Wow.
He gets convicted about 4 years, and that's supposed to change a lot of things. So
you having been an ATF agent, you probably recruited a lot of gang members or criminals to become your informant or your witness or do your undercover stuff, right? Now, how do you feel? Like, I know you could probably give them permission to, maintain credibility. They can commit low-level crime or whatever. Okay, steal a car, maybe deal some weed.
Yeah, I told them, you gotta go clean. I never give them any license to do anything.
Because I think that in some instances they can allow that.
How
would you feel? How would you feel if you found out one of your CIs was committing murders?
No, you can't do that. That's a mistake.
Right.
You can't have anything like that. Then they go from a cooperator, they become they have another felony charges they're going to look at, and they got other serious situations. No, you're going to work with me. At least I did. This is how I work. That's where I like them to introduce me as soon as possible, because I did my undercover. Some people don't like the undercover work, don't want to. They just have informants do it all. I was the opposite. I like to have the introduction and do it myself, because you cut them out, there's less headaches, because a case can go sideways, because at the end, some of these guys still go back to the dark side.
And a lot of informants have ulterior motives. They'll fabricate stuff and tell their handlers it went down this way, or I got this and that. It's not even the case. So I can see your point to where you'd want to remove the informant as early as possible.
I did.
But that's like people in my situation. I used to run kilos of coke to New York, and then I was dealing ounces and 8 balls in Vegas and South Florida, New York. I never wanted to meet anybody new for exactly that reason, because we'd be like, I don't need to meet your friend. I'll deal with you. You're always
if you can't make the intro, it's I understand that you're stuck with that situation, but you always push it. But greed, when the guy say, hey, this guy has money, man, he's willing to move product, he's good, he's solid, go talk to him. And
speaking of greed, have you seen the movie that just came out, The Sound of Freedom?
I have not. I think you mentioned it. Others have mentioned it about God's Children Not for Sale.
Right. I gave it a 5-star review.
Oh, wow.
That allegedly Disney had control of for 5 years and wouldn't release.
I know that.
I'm not going to speculate as to motive, read between the lines. My review is like this. If you support people that will traffic in kids and do all this crap and exploit them, I don't care if it's this country and around the world, I want you to unsubscribe from my channel, unfriend me. You don't support my channel, you support me. I have millions of fans. I appreciate everybody. But if you cannot support the people that are going after this and trying to end it and expose it, get off my channels, because we don't have nothing in common.
Yeah,
I gave it a 5.
That's a huge industry.
It is the first movie I saw since getting out of prison. I've been out a little over a year and a half now. The first movie I've seen in the theater since I got out.
Oh, you saw it in the theater? Oh, good for you.
It blew me away, and it killed the other movie in the ratings. What the heck was it?
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones. The big.
I think Harrison Ford is a little too old to already play. Indiana
Yeah,
Jones.
So what's he gonna do? He's gonna fight with. We're looking for the hidden stash of Geritol or something.
He needs to be careful not to fly any more planes. I think he's already crashed 2 of his planes already.
I remember that one was on a golf course in California.
Hopefully, the 3rd one. I hope he learns his lesson, man.
Unfortunately, that's how John Denver died, flying an experimental airplane. So what do you have to say about the 1%ers and your work with these cases and the threat?
I think it's a fascinating read. If you don't know much about the 1%ers, you always were. My books are perfect. They're good reads. I put it together in a larger read about the 1%er violent biker gangs. So I put them all together in one book, or I got separate books. So if you want to read about Doc Cavazos, Mongol Nation, his story is fascinating. I mean, I'll give you a quick little story about this guy. This guy was a hardcore Sudan. Now, it made sense how this guy, Cavazos or Sonny Barger, it never made sense to me why Taco Bowman became head of the Outlaws when he was raised in Catholic schools. But then I listened to other shows, and you guys, these Italian hitmen guys who also were altar boys, Catholics, went to Catholic schools. Al Capone went to Catholic school also. And look what he ended up going. So sometimes even the best schooling doesn't help.
Guess what? I went to Catholic schools for most of my childhood, parochial schools, we call them.
Yeah.
I was an altar boy. I was not abused as an altar boy. I was funny of this with the nuns grabbing.
Oh, the ruler. Oh, yeah.
Yes, and whacking knuckles with the blackboard compass. Yeah,
we all got that. Sure.
But look how I turned out. 18 years in prison. And,
so that's why I concern people. It's like, wow, it's a little concerning. but this guy, I understand why he became the head of the Mongols, because he was a Sureño, right? He was raised in an L.A. East L.A. street gang. His name is Ruben Doc. They call him Doc Cavazos because he was a radiologist, and he did it part time, and that's why they call him Doc. He got that nickname, and he rose to ranks. But he was a Sureño, and people know who Sureños are. They're affiliated with Mexican mafia. They're 13. Anybody was a 13? 13 M is the 13th letter in the alphabet, right?
Yeah, I've heard them. Yeah,
Sir 13, Sureño 13. So that means they're a tough street gang, tough. And he rose to ranks, and he recruited a lot of guys. And this is a fascinating story. Operation Black Rain will come out because he wanted to be tough. He saw, and this is what I read, and when I said he thought these guys were soft. A bunch of old white guys who wanted to drink beer, and he wanted to toughen these guys up and bring up what he was. Sonny was feared, right? So he was bringing guys, biker guys like the Harleys, right? He brought guys who had trucks, who never rode a bike before, right? He recruited these kind of guys, and he recruited quickly. Well, ATF and Operation Black Rain, not only was there 1 agent infiltration, not only 2, not only 3, not only 4, not only 5, not only 6. Not only 7, but 8. 4 male agents, and then they needed girlfriends, so they brought 4 female ATF agents. So you had 8 ATF agents, and Operation Black Rain had infiltrated the Mongols. It would absolutely decimate them in 2008, leading to over 60-some indictments, over 100 search warrants, the seizure of farms, and everything else. And at the end, he himself cooperates, because normally these guys, the head of the organization, they're the last to plead, right? He was the first to get on board.
Well, that's what I was telling you earlier. Even in prison, they're the leaders of the first ones running to the investigator, getting called out for secret visits. I had a gang member of a major black street gang, as a law clerk, come to me and say, if you tell anybody what I'm about to say, I'll have you killed. My homeboys are going to jump you. Look, I need to talk to you about my case. I said, what's up? But he said, I got to go back to court. He said, I helped out with a murder investigation, and they were on their deal. They're not giving me the deal. I got screwed over in court. I need to hold them accountable. But I'm afraid to file anything because then my homeboys will find out, I cooperated.
Yeah, they're snitches.
And I just gave him some basic advice because I did not want to be in the middle of that mess, where the leader was like admitting to me that he's a CI. I was like, oh man, I gotta bail from this situation.
Well, how does Sonny Barger look like when the sergeant is testifying that he cooperated for years in reference to Black Panther members and Underground Weather? I know they're ultra leftist groups, some domestic terrorist groups, but they still cooperate with law enforcement.
Yeah. I think I've learned one thing from being, in the life I was involved with for a while and in prison, is that the most vocal against the informants and the snitches are the ones doing it themselves. It's like projection.
Yeah. And later they say another guy who was head of the Mongols, David Santillan, Little Dave, he also was cooperating. Right. And if you want to see a video out there, I believe his wife, they had some sort of argument, and it appears she was drinking. Not sure he was drinking, And the same case agent of Black Rain took down Doc Cavazos, allegedly was his handler, right? Allegedly, second time now, not one. Now they got two ahead of the Mongols. Is with him and saying, "What am I going to do? Yeah, this guy. I need an exit plan." And you can hear it all. You just type it in there. He's retiring, and she records the whole thing and she leaks it out. They said, "I need an exit plan. He's retiring. What the hell am I going to do?"
Who leaked it? Who leaked it?
The wife does.
Oh,
She's pissed. Later, she regrets it, and then you got to look at the drama with David Santi and all that. It's fascinating. Look,
we'll have to study that case. You know, you would talk about how they're bringing them down with racketeering cases and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, what Professor Blakely came up with this idea to prosecute him under this. He's the one that developed the law. But I was in Fresno, California, not long ago. I'm not going to mention the name of this supposed club who owns this building. You guys, and ATF, FBI, whoever, must have a hell of a time penetrating these places to wire them up, because this one clubhouse out there, it was, I would never forget, it had like razor ribbon, like prison razor ribbon all around it, you know, security fence, security, there's iron doors. I'm like, how do you penetrate a place like that if you want to wire it, or even safely go in there without thinking you're going to come out and, you know, pieces?
Well, that's why it takes a special person to be undercover, right?
Man.
You go in there and they close the doors, and you got to be on your game. Like I've done cases when hotel rooms with bad people, right? Home invaders, and you're there, and you got to be ready to act. I mean, and move quickly, and you know what the consequences might be.
Right. It's one thing if you're going in as a guy and maybe you can fight or shoot pretty well, but these females, you said they're bringing in agents. You know, the public perception is the public perception. I'm not trying to offend any women or any bikers. Is that the women are passed around pretty liberally. Right. So aren't they in even more risk of being abused or, you know, used?
But if you're the property of somebody, then you belong to that person.
Right.
So okay. You have to respect that.
I think before they become property, though, you know.
If they're not property and they're open, then it's open game. Yeah. It's crazy time. So interesting books there. I think if you found this conversation interesting, go to Amazon, type it in, and we'll put some of the links in there, right, Bill? And
absolutely.
And if they want this more conversation like this, let us know. We can definitely give you more information on these biker groups. I've done quite a bit of extensive research. I've also seen it firsthand. I mean, you see Florida. So going back to Florida and other like Indiana and other places where outlaws have control, it appears that the pagans and Mongols might be going to war because they're expanding to maybe knock out the outlaws, who seem to be a little bit weaker in their minds. So interesting wars to watch out. Watch out for the battle in Nevada between the Vagos and the Hells Angels. Nasty shootout there. They're now testifying against the Hells Angels, at least 6, maybe more. And the chapter president of them, they're looking at quite a bit of time for attempted murder. We'll set up. The trial should be next year. We'll keep an eye on that one too, Bill.
Interestingly, circling back to a current affairs case we did, Charles Ray Smith, who just went to prison, FBI, Elkhart, Indiana. It was publicized, so I'm not saying anything that's not out there, was working as an informant for the federal government, I believe ATF and FBI. He set up a guy named Dr. Scholl. He set up allegedly other people. He allegedly planted, when he ripped people off financially and they were going to go to the police, these people would allegedly disappear, allegedly be murdered. And in other cases, he was known to give a laptop loaded with child porn to them and then send the agents in to go bust them a few days later and put these people in prison.
Yeah.
While he's doing this, he's also working as a CI. Now, again, there was a press release and an article. I could probably put the links in the descriptions. What he would do, because he had so many Harleys and he had the big gray handlebar mustache and everything, he looked a little thuggish in the face, you know, but he was a coward. He was armed with multiple guns at all time. He was a gun dealer. He was always dealing with the police and everything. And he had colors for 2 gangs. One was the Hells Angels. He actually had cuts. I don't know if he had them made. And the other one, I forget. It was either pagans or outlaws. I personally saw them. He would pose as being in leadership of these while he's working as an informant to terrorize people to not call the police on him after being ripped off.
That's why the government wants to go after the patches, so people can't use that and terrorize people with it. His
friends discreetly told me he is not a 1% biker. He's nobody, and nobody he's
a fraud.
Streets trust him.
He's a fraud, a scammer, like you said.
But imagine him wearing the colors of these gangs and trying to intimidate people to not call the police on him for his financial crimes. A guy who's a millionaire living in a mansion, posing as an outlaw biker.
Yeah, a lot of times these guys don't deal with that well, and they come across someone like that, it's bad news for that person.
He's in prison now, and he, like I said, he's probably facing some murder charges and everything else. And anybody who tries to help him, my understanding is he informs on them too. So nobody trusts to go around this guy anymore. But anyway, great show. And
Yes, man, that's another good one.
About these, things I didn't know, 1%ers. And again, we make cover Freddie's case. Let me find out some more about it. I'll get the information to you.
Yeah, that'd be good. These are good shows. We keep it on. We'll do it. Any other topics? We can do the mafia next one. We have so many different crime syndics I've written about. We can continue to do it and talk about current events. And the big one, of course, the Mexican cartels. And if you haven't seen our previous shows that we've done so many, I think over 10, 12, 14, I don't know how many. Check them out. They're all really good. And we'll talk about so many things. And if you like, especially about the mafia, and you want to hear more about, what happened in Miami and the mafia, Capone, Castro, Traficante, Lansky trying to kill Castro. Check it out, man. That show is doing really well. Pretty cool.
You know what I'd like to do with you as well? We can do a show about, because I have a big history in New York City and in South Florida. I was a very, very prolific burglar in South Florida. I want to do another crime prevention show. And again, this is about crime prevention, where we discuss super high profile burglary cases there. I'm not even going to speak about mine, but the Spider-Man case, if you're familiar with that. That's Derek James. He was hitting Miami high rises. He was a former, special paratrooper or something. He had a pawn shop. He had this. So Derek James case. The other one, the guy, he was a Cuban guy. He hit the Fanjul Sugar family house in Beach County. He also hit Kathleen Height Ford's house for another $8 or $12 million in jewelry, and he's still in prison today. I just looked up his pictures. He's aging in prison. But so I'd like to cover, and then the Dinner Set Gang and the Walter Shaw family, and who's Larry Lawton, I think, is another one. Let's do a story on profiling these guys. Maybe
sure. No, absolutely. You can give your insight, what you think was done, and what can people do, business owners, and also we can talk a little more with the serial killers. We talked about Richard Ramirez and D'Angelo, how they would stalk and watch and what things people need to do. I know we talked briefly about one of the shows. Is keep just basic things. Keep your lights on at night. Don't have a dark home. Don't have your windows open. Don't try it. Just do the little things right, and have signs around everything else that's going to say bad dog. Even if you don't have security cameras or you don't have being monitored, get those signs. People, they give them away. Put them in front of your house anyways. Just make them think twice. Hey, monitor our security, man. This must be some really good security. I can't see anything here. Where is it? Right. Just scare people with it.
My book about crime, burglary, and home invasion prevention, hopefully will be out soon. You know how it is. You intend to do it, and it's like getting long, and then I'm like, well, is it too long? And I've asked you to write the foreword. You've agreed to look it over and write the foreword. I appreciate that.
Yeah, send it to me.
You, as a retired federal ATF agent, I want you to give a message to people who might be thinking of joining a 1% biker club right now.
Don't do it.
Give a message from your point of view, from being in law enforcement.
It's not a lifestyle you want. You don't want to be part of that. I mean, I remember, I want to tell a personal story here, and I was back in the early '90s. I just graduated from college. A buddy and I were in Alaska. We were camping, working a fishing cannery, and I think it was near Nikiski, and it was intense, 12-hour days. Probably the hardest labor I ever did in my life. Just graduated from college. It's really cold. You're skinning the fish, you're putting and stacking them, freezing conditions and all that, getting fish slime all over you and all that stuff. But beautiful. I mean, it was in the summer. Unbelievable. We had daytime, you would go out and travel. And I believe we were in near Fairbanks, and there was a festival. And you had the Northern Lights coming out, which is beautiful, stuff like that. And we meet different people. And I noticed Hell's Angels were there. They're doing security. And, they were known for doing a lot of security and stuff like that. And then went to the bar, and we met one of the guys there. And I really didn't know anything about the Hells Angels. And I was saying, hey, I heard you guys do a lot of work for Toys for Tots and everything. He told me it's a bunch of bullshit. I said, I want nothing to do with these guys. These guys are a bunch of fucking scumbags, whatever. And it's like nothing to do with them. And I was like, okay, good to know that. And that's what I tell them. And then years later, working cases, it's what some of these guys, I mean, there might be a few guys, but if you're in that culture, I mean, look at most of these guys turn out. Look at the horrors they commit: drug trafficking, armed trafficking, extortion, murder among themselves. You go to Canada, Boucher, he was notorious, Canadian Hells Angels, killing his own. I mean, if you crossed them, they don't care if you had the same colors on. They'll kill them too. They're notorious in killing their own chapter members. And I wrote a book about the Hells Angels. Look about Boucher and the stuff this guy did. He died recently, also in prison. He dies. Taco Bowman dies. These guys, he cooperates. Sonny Barger, he had throat cancer. He was talking from a throat box. I mean, the whole 9 yards of these guys.
Bottom line, never ends well. In prison, death,
Does
misery,
not.
and you devastate your family in the process and everybody who cares about you.
Not worth it. Don't do it.
That being said, I extend an offer from Steal a Spotlight TV. If you are a reformed or a changed man and you are in the biker lifestyle, 1% biker especially, look me up, official William Steele at iCloud.com. You're more than welcome to come on the show. Let me see some evidence that you're trying to do the right thing. Maybe you're talking to kids. Maybe you wrote a book. You're welcome here. Maybe with myself. Maybe with Ignacio.
Sounds good.
Thanks again.
All right, guys.
See
Until
you
next
guys
time.
next time.
Thank you.
All right. Got it.
Good.
Oh, I forgot to record.